next speaker knows color. She has given countless talks on how to implement color systems in all of your design systems. As a director of design infrastructure at GitHub, she leads a team of designers and engineers. Over the past 5 years, her team has developed GitHub's design system, Primer, from a CSS framework to a React and Rails component library, and reshaped GitHub's UX through refreshing visual design and delivering GitHub's one of most highly requested features, dark mode. She's here to share with you all how themeability is not just for color and why a themeable design system will help you scale into the future. Presenting the Diff after dark mode, please welcome to the virtual stage, Diana Mounter.
Hi, I'm Diana. I'm going to talk about the Diff after dark mode. I work for GitHub. GitHub is used by millions of developers around the world. It's a place where you can host and collaborate on software. The chances are that your company uses code hosted on GitHub. So I thought I'd start with a bit of context. Back in 2017, when I last spoke at Clarity, I had just become a manager of the design systems team at GitHub. There were only 3 of us working on design systems at that time. And earlier that year, we had shipped a big update to our color system. At that time, because there was only 3 of us, I was doing a lot of hands-on work. So things have changed a little bit since then. Our team has grown quite a lot. I'm now a director. I don't have time to do hands-on work, but I've hired a team who can do that work a lot better than I can. And last year, we shipped another big update to our color system, which was to add theming and ship dark mode. And earlier this year, we shipped more themes and also did a major update to the infrastructure behind that. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So I wanted to start with some context on where we were in 2017. So at that time, we were using CSS. And so we were mostly delivering our design system through our CSS framework. We had a website that looked like this, a little bit drab looking color-wise, and it needed an update. So as part of that work, we moved a lot of our hex values that were not part of any system at all into SAS variables. And we introduced a color scale so that we really had like a color system to work with. And our site ended up looking a little more modern like this. A little bit brighter, a little more contrast. And then since then, we started working on other things. We started to feel that CSS wasn't giving us enough leverage with our design system. And we started exploring React components. Around that time, teams weren't using React on github.com, but they were starting to experiment with React in other applications. And slowly, we started to develop and explore working with components. This also started to get me thinking a little differently about theming. Around this time, we set up a library called primitives. This is where we started to store our theme that we wanted to share across Primer CSS and Primer React. You might call this design tokens. We have our colors in there, we have spacing and typography and that sort of thing. And this influenced how I started to think about theming. Later on in 2019, an engineer at GitHub saw what we were doing with React and thought, hey, maybe I can bring this to Rails. And they started to develop a Rails component framework called View Components. And so then we had Primer CSS and View Components and React to work with. So we had 3 different implementations of our system that we needed to consider when we were going into this color update. We had a large-scale application, github.com, which was primarily using View Components and CSS. And we also had some sites under development in Primer React, one of which is the new issues which launched earlier this year. So even though this site wasn't going to launch for Universe, it was still something that we had to consider when we updated our color system. So why did GitHub need dark mode? Well, if you're not familiar with it, GitHub is a place where you might look at code, review code, give feedback, host it. And quite often, developers are going from their terminal or text editor, and they've traditionally either just been default in it with a dark theme, or they've had many options for developers to choose from to customize their theme. So you can imagine a developer going from working on a dark screen to jumping onto GitHub and it being kind of bright. That's kind of jarring and not very great for that developer experience. And we started getting a really strong signal over the last few years that developers wanted GitHub to have a dark mode. It got to the point where any new feature was launched and there would be like another tweet following it like, cool, but where's dark mode? Another signal that we really needed to consider dark mode was to look at like, were people finding workarounds? We could certainly get that signal from seeing like a user-generated theme having 20,000 plus users. So that was a big, strong signal to us that we needed to consider this. So having worked on color back in 2017, I started to think about what would that mean? How would it change to work with color in dark mode? As a sort of a bit of a hack project, and when I was exploring another talk, I built this demo, kind of a bit of a joke using Star Wars characters, to see what it would be like to build a dark mode. Now, some of these things are going to be obvious to you if you've gone through this phase, but if you haven't, these are some of the sort of pitfalls or things that I think are great tips to know about designing with dark mode. So the first one being like, hey, why can't we just like invert the colors? Let's just flip the scales. Shouldn't that just work? And it can in some cases, but it doesn't quite. What I noticed is that I needed to move colors more than just their sort of inverse step. I needed to adjust them and tweak them a bit. I noticed this on things like our navigation underline. Colors act differently when they're on a dark background. More so, I noticed that using the same scale for dark mode that we were using for light mode didn't quite work in some places, particularly in our contributions graph. I noticed that I needed to kind of tweak the hues because we wanted the brightest colors to communicate this is where there's the most contributions, as opposed to in light mode where we had like the darkest colors communicating the most contributions. You needed to kind of tweak those colors so that they really glowed and communicated that same meaning. So I found that not only did I need to sort of adjust steps in the scale, I also needed to redesign parts of the palette that were underlying that theme. I think this quote from an Apple keynote in 2019 describes it well. Dark mode is not an inversion, it's dimming the lights. When you dim the lights, colors don't just flip. They look a bit different. The hues look a bit different. The contrast looks different. Another big thing I learned was that we really couldn't live with using our presentational color names. We needed a layer of abstraction, and in some places those presentational names started to not make sense. So as well as wanting a single variable to point to two different hues in light and dark mode, we also needed to, in some cases, be able to change what that hue was altogether. So for example, we're working on a colorblind theme, which will hopefully have shipped by the time you watch this talk. And in that case, we might want to change something that is green to blue, because we know that people have a lot of problems with red and green. And at GitHub, we use red and green in a lot of places, unfortunately, to show additions and deletions of code. So what did it take to deliver dark mode? Well, it took a lot of iteration. Even though we had pretty good ideas about how we might want to design the infrastructure of the system, we still needed to think about what was the end user going to experience. What were customers of GitHub going to see? Aurora worked really hard on exploring all sorts of different variations of themes to see what really felt right for GitHub. While she was working on the sort of full page redesigns, Julius, another designer on the team, started to work on our color scales. He took what I did in 2017 and iterated on that and improved it, made it really systematic, made sure that we had really consistent contrast scales, and this helped us to start to make a more predictable color system. While the designers were exploring that side of things, our developers also worked on proof of concepts. Getting those proof of concepts working in GitHub early, I think, was really important. We could have worked for a while in the system itself, but what we really needed to do is see, can we deliver this to github.com? So as the designers started to iterate, work on the scales, and work on like what would that full page design look like, we started to get closer to what felt like dark mode for GitHub. As Aurora and Julius started to collaborate more and more, Aurora working on the full page designs and Julius working on the color scales, we had a funny moment in one of our design reviews when these started to come together and we were getting closer to what we thought would be GitHub dark mode. We started to have a bit of a hot debate over whether we wanted it to be space gray or jet black. This is nicknamed after the iPhone colors. We ended up going with something that looks closer to jet black. We knew that we would also probably need to add something later that was a bit more dimmed and subdued, and that one theme probably wouldn't fit all, but we felt like jet black would work for the majority of people who wanted a dark mode. So there's some key things that I wanted to highlight about our approach to this launch that I think really helped make it successful. We kicked off in July, so we didn't have a huge amount of time to get things working and ready for launch in November. We did early proofs of concepts in August. We started to ship to other GitHubbers so that they could give us feedback around September, and then eventually getting all of our staff using dark mode and letting us know if they find bugs. So a key component that I think really helped make this successful was that we really over-communicated the work. No one at GitHub could not realize we were shipping dark mode for Universe. That also helped us with getting staff to dog food and test and give us feedback and let us know if they saw any problems. Another element was that we really carefully prioritized which views needed to work best in dark mode. So we focused on things that were really critical parts of our UI, like code review, issues, that type of thing. And we really ruthlessly prioritized. We had to really make sure that it was a really tight scope, because we'd rather ship a smaller amount of things that really worked well in dark mode than try and do sort of like an okay, mediocre job in a lot of places. And so then came launch day. We launched dark mode with a spectacularly over-the-top, perhaps, video. It was kind of like Avengers meets Ferris Bueller's Day Off if you watched it. It was really exciting, and it was super exciting to see the responses from people. It might sound silly, but in the year that was 2020, it was nice to give our customers something that they had wanted for so long. And here we had our dark mode. So what was the diff after dark mode? What was the impact of that? What did we learn from it? So what we learned is that yes, people wanted dark mode. As you can see from the stats, more people are using dark mode than light mode. So that was really great that we had spent all that time and work on this, and actually a lot of people wanted it. What was really great though is that not everyone wants dark mode. We kind of knew that people want to use different themes based on their preferences, or use a light mode in the day and dark at night, and it was really good to see that being validated. We saw a great response from our customers. They even found the launch style video really exciting or fun. And also the way that we launched it. We spent a bit of extra time on in-app sort of promos. It was kind of funny because our team doesn't usually work on these sort of delightful animation things, and I had to reassure our team that it was okay to spend time on that sort of thing. Like in systems, we're usually working on making things like very sensible and reusable, and this was obviously going to not be reused for anything except for dark mode. It was really fun because we hoped that it would be kind of viral, that people would not only share that GitHub had dark mode, but the way that they were introduced to dark mode, and we kind of saw that happen on Twitter. And of course, there was some feedback that we had anticipated. There were some customers that wanted a higher contrast theme, and there were some customers that found it too bright and they wanted something more like that space gray dimmed theme. And so around that time, I was talking with Julius about his color scale work, and I was like, what do you think about potentially being able to just change an entire theme from the color palette only? Like, what if we just changed the underlying color scale? And Julius was really skeptical at first, but with a little bit of exploration, he was like, I think we can do this, and he accepted the challenge. And so he used his approach to tonal scale that he had been developing for dark mode, and by just changing that tonal scale, he was able to design a palette for a dimmed theme really, really quickly. And that enabled us to do a lot of the changes in just the color scale alone. And soon, early in 2021, we were able to ship another theme, the dark dimmed theme, to GitHub customers, which is really great given that we knew that that was something a lot of people wanted. As we started to learn how the color scale alone could provide a lot of leverage for our design system, we also started to notice problems elsewhere in the system. The API surface area was too large, and that made it kind of complex to use. It was hard to remember the names of certain colors. We had a lot of variables that could only be used in certain components or in the application itself that couldn't be globally reused in a lot of places. One of the things that we realized we needed to work on for us to be able to really solve and improve the system was our light mode scale. This was still using the same system from 2017, and we hadn't updated it to use those new tonal scales and be very systematic and have really good even contrast like we had with dark mode. And so this brought the Functional Color System V2 project. I considered using this as my title, but it's a little bit of a mouthful. So Julius, who had been working on how could we make as many changes as possible from our scale, brought that technique to our light mode and made it more consistent. You can see from the before-after animation that before, from the 2017 version, each color has a slightly different tonal scale, and that makes it really hard to predictably map to functional variables. Through working on the underlying color scale and working on the light mode scale to make it more consistent, we were able to significantly reduce the API surface area, almost by half. We had global variables that were able to be used in many more places, and we were able to see this when we started to update from the old system to the new system on github.com. In this one pull request, John Rohan was able to replace 173 variables with just 37. We were able to deliver a more consistent and higher contrast light mode. We tried to make this minimal changes. We didn't want to completely redesign this, just improve how we used color in our light theme. And at the end of this, we were able to deliver a high contrast theme as well. Going back to our stats, we were able to see that people still really valued having a dark mode, and dark mode themes overall were still more popular than light mode. We could see that our dimmed theme was really popular, and we've only just recently launched high contrast, and it's much lower, but it still shows us that there are quite a lot of people that want to be able to have that option when they use GitHub. Another important thing about this work is to make sure that the developer experience of GitHubbers, of our colleagues that we work with, is great. And so through that multiple iteration, through getting to do that second stage of work, we were able to improve how we migrated from one system to another. In this example, we're telling people which variable they can replace something that was deprecated with. We were also able to improve our documentation. In the first iteration, we didn't spend too much time on it, and that made it hard for other GitHubbers to know how to use the system. But then again, the API was really quite complicated, and I don't know how much that more documentation would have helped. Now we have docs that work in light and dark mode and the other themes, and we can keep building this up to make our system easier for other GitHubbers to use. So I want to talk through some reflections that I have on this project. One thing, like I was just saying, is with our documentation is to bring the team with you. We kind of worked in a bit of a silo. We felt, I think, under a bit of a crunch to try and get everything shipped in time for Universe. And we didn't do much documentation, and then with a complex API, it made it hard for people on our own team to actually know how to use the system. We could have shared more along the way, we could have involved them more, and I think that was a mistake. The other thing is that, in my opinion, no other theme will be as popular as dark mode. We were all on kind of a high of excitement once that had shipped, and once it was over, we were just like, I guess we're not going to get that kind of big splash again. The other thing that I think is really important is that we got to do that phase 2 of the project. We got to learn from what we did in phase 1, and we got to really complete the system. We're still doing some of that work now, but it's been great to be able to take what we learned from that first phase and continue with it. It's really easy and tempting to go from shipping one shiny thing to the next, but the value of systems is in that long-term incremental work. And finally, be aware that perfection is the enemy of good. It's really easy to sort of iterate and tweak with this type of work, with any systems work really. Once we were able to be public about what we're working on, we've tried to get our new themes out to customers earlier, even if they're a little bit rough around the edges, so that we don't sort of go down our own rabbit holes tweaking those themes. The key reflection that I had is that the value is in the themeability, not just the themes. Of course, to our customers, the themes are what they care about. But I realized that as we got a month or so into 2021, that leadership didn't realize what we were really working on is making the system great. For a while, I think that they thought we were just working on like a high contrast theme. But what we were really doing was making a really great, robust and themeable design system. And that brings me to my final points. I think themeability is really important for scaling design systems. At GitHub, we have multiple websites and applications that we're trying to support with one system. We could consider having multiple design systems. I know certainly a lot of companies have a different design system for their marketing sites to their product, but I actually think that we can get a lot of leverage from building those foundations in the same way. Yes, we might have some different tooling and some different components and subsystems that need to support those different needs, but I think that we can work from the same foundations. And quite often we actually find that the same people are working across parts of the marketing sites or applications as well as our product. And so it's really nice if they don't have to sort of relearn that whole world and be in a completely different setting when they need to work on a different problem. So the idea being that we can have the same button component and swap out those theme values, like change the colors, change the type sizes, change the spacing, and get quite different results. So that we can deliver quite different looking websites or different parts of the site, like our GitHub organization page versus our home page with some really stunning design work on it. I think themeability is a design system superpower. It enables you to make a lot of big changes from a kind of a single place, from that theme, from those design tokens. It gives you a lot of leverage. And if you build a system where you can change something like typography and it doesn't break all the button sizes, and if you can change colors and it still holds that same meaning in the UI that it's meant to in different themes, then you have a really scalable design system. You have a really adaptable design system that can work for many, many use cases. I think for us, dark mode is what helped us sell that, but themeability is where the real value is. Thank you for watching.
All right, great. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you for having me.
I gotta say,
Or is it welcome, Cruella?
Yes, it's like you look amazing. I love this.
Thank you very much.
You were also telling me that you're basically dressed as like dark and light mode too. So that's pretty cool.
Dark mode, light mode.
It's so good. It's so good. I love this. So real quick, there is also a little special guest that's going to join us real quick.
Yeah,
as long as they can
we'll see.
As long as they can tolerate it anyway.
Hey, you're famous. Sure, let me do this for a second. But yeah, this is the high fiving cat, Leia.
Hello. Hello,
Say
you're
hello,
famous,
Leia.
kitty. Claire's like, put me down, unhand me, woman.
Surprised she didn't try and pull my wig off. I'll give her another little treat.
Yes, you earned your treat. Okay, great. Oh, that's so good. Oh, yes, we had to make sure we kept up the cats of clarity theme, and also like get a better animal diversity of species diversity of animals here, because we had Guff dogs representing Guff and Booker, so
I do also have a little Dalmatian.
Oh yes, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Of course, Corella and her Dalmatians, obviously. I love this. Okay, cool. So we have quite a few questions here. Let's see if we can just kind of get right into it. Although I do want to say, like, personally, I always find your talks to be so like informative and so like practically useful. Like it's you have this way of like taking like a very complex thing and like distilling it down into ways that like that people can better easily understand. And so like I definitely love that. I also like love the fact that you clearly know a lot about like color and color theory and how to work with colors. Like even though like I do think of myself as a designer sometimes, like color theory is a thing that I still feel like I don't quite grasp great, like in a great way. So like every time I listen to you talk, I'm like, oh cool, that's how you do that. Okay.
It is never ending. I don't know if I'll ever finish learning about color for sure. I feel like I've learned so much, and then I just discover new things about color all the time.
Yeah, sure. It's like I said, it's a kind of an infinitely complex thing. And I always I joke with my designer friends, because designers tend to love to wear all black. I'm like, why do we spend so much time studying colors if you're not going to use colors? But I get it. It's much easier to just kind of have one color scheme and be kind of done with it. Cool. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and get into some of these questions here. And the first question we have is from Wale, and he would like to know, did you do much A and B testing to make decisions about dark mode features and colors? And if so, like where was this most helpful?
Yeah, with the first theme, which is the sort of default dark mode, we didn't do testing with customers. That was one that we wanted to keep under wraps. And I think I sort of mentioned this in the talk, that was challenging because we had to sort of, make our best guess based on like looking at other themes people were using, the feedback that we had gotten from customers, seeing how other applications had approached dark mode. But with all the themes that we've released since then, so with dimmed and with high contrast, and currently we also have a colorblind beta out, those we've shipped betas really early as soon as we can to get feedback and refine and enhance those themes to make sure that they meet customer expectations. And of course, like after the initial dark mode ship, we also got tons of feedback, worked through that, figured out what made sense to update in the theme, or whether it should be just part of a new theme. Hopefully that answered the question.
I think so, yeah. So Bill would like to know, and actually I'm very curious about this myself, how do you ship something like dark mode incrementally? Because I'm having a very vivid flashback to when Slack implemented dark mode, and even though I wasn't the one who had to actually do the work, like I remember like it was kind of like a real like nerve-wracking experience. It was like it was all or nothing, like okay, and it's on and we're going, and it was just, I'm just kind of curious to know, how do you ship something like that, like in small doses?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there is only so much that you can sort of break down because you're literally changing like all the colors. And so there's a certain amount that, it just has to flip, right? The way that we approached it incrementally though, is by first off, like testing our hypothesis about how we were going to like build this. So like from the engineering side, we got a sort of proof of concept in production as soon as possible, while the designers started to sort of explore like the look and feel. And then the other thing that we did is we ruthlessly prioritized, I think I said this in the talk, and it's a phrase that I find myself using a lot sometimes, but yeah, just really being careful about like how much of the application we were going to ship. in dark mode. And so we really tried to focus that around what we felt was like the real core experience where dark mode would be particularly valued. So things like a pull request seemed like one of those pages that should be something that would be in dark mode straight away, and that would be really valuable. And so we kind of scoped out pages that we weren't sort of ready to go and refine and make sure that they worked really well. We also prioritized, features that were shipping at Universe as well, to make sure that as many of those could ship with dark mode straight off the bat. So yeah, it was really about like thinking what is going to be the most useful parts of the site to ship in dark mode, having the setup so that we could choose to very specifically what views to opt out and what to opt in, and then making sure that we just worked with other teams that were hoping to ship their features in dark mode to make sure that they looked great. But yeah, there was a certain big chunk of that just had to ship in one go.
Yeah, I'm remembering, like I mentioned before, that Slack has two design systems, one for marketing and product, and the product design system clearly was the one who had to implement dark mode. And I just remember like kind of just sort of observing the process of them first switching all of our variables to be more agnostic and not reference the actual colors and to be a little bit more functionally named, and then just going through the meticulous process of like finding the correct color for the light version alternative and all of that thing. And it was just kind of fascinating to watch. And I just think that the way that you described it in your talk and the way that GitHub has implemented it, it's just like really, it's so very clever. And I'm very impressed by that.
Thank you.
Actually, that kind of goes into the next question that I and Henri has, is that is on top of your head, is there someone out there who you think has really nailed, who's nailed dark mode? Aside from yourself, obviously.
Yeah, I was like, who how do I answer this question? I do think that Slack did a really great job. I think actually both with the visual, with the sort of design brand refresh that you did, and with dark mode, it just felt really smooth. That Slack is definitely one of the apps that we sort of referenced a lot as a sort of a point of like, they've done this before, they've got multiple themes, so we've definitely been checking out Slack's approach to this a lot along the way.
I think a few of my Slack colleagues are probably here, so congrats to you all. Like you all did a really good job. Like I said, I was watching you from the sidelines thinking like, you're doing great, sweetie. Yes. Okay, cool. So the next question we have here, let's see, is from Natalie. Natalie would like to know, are there any other notable UX considerations that come from dark mode that come to mind for you?
Notable UX considerations. I'm not sure exactly what she might be looking for there, but here's some things that popped up. I think like when we were working on dark mode, Aurora in particular, actually, who's one of the lead designers on our team, noticed a lot of issues with existing patterns, like through the lens of applying dark mode. You have to be like super logical, because you've got to sort of like tie these functional variables to work in many different places, and that helps you spot like inconsistencies in the way that we've chosen to apply color in components, and over time, an application like GitHub, which is years and years old and had thousands, or probably thousands actually of employees at this point, iterating on that. Sometimes like what once made sense doesn't anymore. And so I think actually, working on dark mode is one of the best things that we could have done for our design system, and also to sort of look at our design language in a different way. That's the main thing that sort of springs to mind. And there's a lot of follow-up projects that we sort of have underway. Because of that, also like how do we handle like product illustrations, and that's something that we did some light work on that initially, but that's something that we'll collaborate with our brand team on in future. And then I think the other thing that came up is like user added like images. So people put their org profile or images in their readmes. And of course, they don't all work on all of the modes. So that's something that we've had a bit of feedback on and need to sort of figure out how can we allow customers to have things presented in the way that they want, in a way that's scalable and maintainable by us. That's something that one of our other teams is currently looking into. So yeah, those are I'm not sure if that was what Natalie was going for, but hopefully that was helpful.
Okay. All right, we are running out of time, so I have one more question. I guess a question here would be from Kelly, and Kelly wants to know, how do you think this process would have gone differently if you did not already have a design system in place?
My gut reaction is terribly. I mean, the talk I did I'm not sure how many folks saw my 2017 Clarity talk, but that was to introduce like any sort of like resemblance of a color system. Like we really had hardly anything. And we had thousands of hex values, like not tied together with variables or anything. And so I can't imagine how we would have approached this without some semblance of a system in place. And yeah, I'm so glad that we had at least that foundation. And honestly, we have been thinking and sort of slowly working towards this for a while, to get those foundations in place, getting rid of a lot of technical debt, and having more things like linters to catch sort of modifications that shouldn't exist to the system. And so all of that infrastructure has helped us be in a place where we could ship something like dark mode.
Yeah, I actually 100% agree, because we, like we mentioned, we did a brand refresh or a Slack rebrand, and also we shipped dark mode, and both. If we didn't have both design systems in place, the marketing and product, yeah, I don't experience with the rebrand, that would have gone terribly, because I had to the system had to support the visible brand to the public, but also the rebrand, the refresh in the background while we were still building out everything. And so the first step I did to our design system was go through all of the variables and abstract them out more and make them more functional so I could support the two values. And yeah, if we did not have the design system in place, like I would have cried. That would have been a terrible experience.
Yeah. I think one of the things that, to me, like design systems are about enabling change, right? They're not just there to sort of slow things down or apply a bunch of rules. They're actually to enable you to iterate on your visual style faster. So absolutely agree.
All right, great. Well, that is all the time we have for the Q&A, but thanks so much. It was great having you. And like I said, you look fantastic. I am loving the theme there.
Thank you.
Cool. So so thanks so much, Diana. And next up, we are going to have a lunch break, and then we will be followed up with a talk by Stephanie after that. So see you all later.